as promised, here is a set of takeaways that I have for you from this course. So, the first is that every system of thought, that every time, every age, and we have looked at Greeks, the Islamic Golden Age, Enlightenment, the American Common School, the times around that, colonial times, and then eventually Pakistan. Each one of these times and the systems of thoughts linked with these times or found within these times offer us a framework, right? So, to put it briefly, every system of thought has a specific episteme that makes particular perspectives on what it means to be educated available to us within that time. And that's very important. Let's talk about episteme as constituting a scene. Now, I'm using the term scene in the manner in which I talked about it when I spoke to you about Kenneth Burke's dramatistic pentad, those 5 elements that he speaks about that characterize any human situation, right? Excuse me. So, the scene as episteme, what does that mean? So, a comprehensive scene will contain all the relationships, all the challenges that you have to address, every obstacle that you will ever negotiate within that scene, all the battles that you will pick and the others that you will skip. Everything is there right inside the scene. The scene contains you and it also contains your actions. Now, you can act to improve the scene, to add something new to it, or just alter it by taking something that some people have called a radical action. Your radical act to just change the scene altogether. Right? Let's look at the example of Descartes. So, what's the scene of Descartes? Descartes finds himself in a scene that's populated by chaos, spiritual strife, and Protestant revolt against the Catholic Pope's authority. What does he do? What's his act? The 5 meditations. What's his purpose? To put an end to this doctrinal chaos. What does he achieve? So, in the process of trying to put an end to this chaos, what he ends up doing is creating an altogether a new philosophy, which changes the scene altogether and heralds the advent of modernity. And there's a very important consideration that we should take away from this conversation, which is that the scene determines what's thinkable. Why do I say that? So, Horace Mann is talking about common schools. John Locke doesn't talk about common schools. Rousseau doesn't talk about common schools. Immanuel Kant doesn't talk about common schools. And before that, Al-Farabi or Miskawayh, everybody talks about the importance of education. But their advice is for the mentors, for the parents, and for anyone but the politician. The common school is not thinkable. The common school becomes thinkable in an environment in which you already have a nation state. And for the nation state to exist, it must establish its relations with a construct that we talked about in the last session, the citizen. Right? The citizens are not born, and so they need to be created. Every individual who is part of that nation state is being imagined as a citizen. Right? We had a discussion on citizenship. Now, given this relationship, this imagined relationship between the nation state and the citizen, and to actualize and materialize this relationship in practice, you need an instrument. That instrument is common school. So the scene tells you, it gives you the rationale and the need for common schools. And that didn't exist before Horace Mann, right? And so even though rest of the philosophers that you've talked about talk about education, but stop short of talking about the common school, there's one more thing that I'd like to talk about to end this video, and that's the idea of legacy. From one scene to the other, from a past scene to a future scene. So, to understand that a bit more, think about Al-Farabi, who called himself the second teacher, the first teacher being Aristotle. Also, Miskaway, as we all know, was greatly influenced by the Greek philosophers. All of this became possible because of the openness, the reception of other ways of thinking, other perspectives in the Islamic Golden Age, made possible by the actions of the rulers of that time, because they made this entire translation movement possible. And because of that, the philosophical work done by the Greeks was obviously translated into Arabic and became accessible to people like Al-Farabi and Miskaway and others. So it's safe to say that in the Islamic philosophical thought, you can find the footprints of the Greek philosophers as well. It's also safe to say that in the Western discursive strands, you find the legacies of the Islamic philosophers. What this pushes us to think about is the multiple ways in which these strands of thought come together to form the scene that contains us and contains our acts as educators and the purposes behind those acts and the tensions that we confront and the challenges that we negotiate, right? And so, in order to understand all of those challenges, it's very important to see where they're coming from. Just give you a few examples. The challenge of medium of instruction that we have in Pakistan is very specific to our context. Wouldn't be there if we weren't a post-colonial country, right? And so you have to go back to Macaulay, and not just Macaulay. Also the ways in which the Indians were reacting to these proposals during the colonial time. That'll help you understand the legacy that then determines the problems that you're facing in your time today.